Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alice Eisenberg, and I work at the MITRE Corporation in support of the Army's Telemedicine and Advanced Technology Research Center, TATRIC, in their Technology in Disaster Environments Initiative. So on behalf of TATRIC, I would like to welcome everyone to the final demonstration of medical device autonomy and device interoperability in support of multi-domain operations. It's being hosted by TATRIC and its Device Interoperability and Autonomy Coordinating Center, the DIAC. We have a full agenda for you today, but I want to quickly provide you with some housekeeping tips. If you'd advance the slide, Julian. So first, we are recording today's demo, and we can provide that recording to you if you contact me at the email shown on this slide. In addition, we will have a Q&A session after the demo and the accompanying presentation, at which time we will activate your audio capabilities, but please feel free to place questions in the chat and we will try to answer those in real time whenever possible. And finally, please remember that this is an unclassified brief and refrain from sharing sensitive information. To start us off today, Matt Quinn, the Science Director at TATRIC, will provide us with some introductory remarks. So Matt, over to you.
Hey, thank you so much, Alice and team. I'm so happy that we have the opportunity to share with you the work of this tremendous team today. Before we get started, I wanted to read a short note that TATRIC's commander, Colonel Pamplin, provided for us today. He's been really our guiding light through this and is unfortunately not able to join us today. So I'll start with that. Dear team, technology and disaster environments, and fellow medical technology enthusiasts who are joining us, I am sorry I am unable to join today. I am fortunate to be taking some time with my wonderful wife and family. We appreciate all the love, support, grace, and understanding you have given us these last 11 months. We continue our journey with hope and faith in God and our medical community and continue to pray for a life full of more meaning, relationship, and happiness. Today marks the culmination of TATRIC's COVID-19 portfolio, a 2-year journey to rapidly deliver advanced critical care delivery to resource-limited healthcare environments like rural hospitals struck with COVID surge, or role to U.S. and allied military treatment facilities managing mass casualty events. Contextually, both scenarios are very similar in their resource limitations, even if the casualty populations may be different. Both have fewer trained healthcare providers than necessary to manage all those patients. Both have limited access to medical specialists to help with cases beyond local scope of practice, like infectious disease doctors, neurosurgeons, or intensivists. And neither can monitor all their casualties or consistently manage all those who have need of fundamental critical care resources, like mechanical ventilation with concurrent IV sedation, fluids, and vasoactive medications, all of which are needed for successful management of mechanical ventilation. At the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, we imagined that telemedicine support using readily available communication technologies like network-enabled mobile devices, smartphones, to facilitate communication between a local caregiver and remote experts, combined with a suite of interoperable and interchangeable medical devices, including monitors, ventilators, IV pumps, could significantly improve survivability of patients during a pandemic surge or mass casualty event. By facilitating instantaneous access to remote resources that require no lead time or physical movement to augment the local disaster. Today, this group of visionaries, amazing researchers, scientists, engineers, clinicians, contract specialists, project coordinators, and many, many others will demonstrate this new capability in real time and show how it might enable management of casualties across times of resource limitation. I thank them for their hard work, dedication to this project, and perseverance on this journey. I'm excited to see it all come together and to see where this goes in the future. I think these capabilities will fill multiple gaps in civilian disaster response, in military casualty care during prolonged casualty and mass casualty care, and in both for evacuating critically ill patients without enough trained evacuation personnel. We also face a real challenge today. Because these capabilities were accelerated by the COVID-19 stimulus funding, They are not part of a formal military or civilian research program. And we have yet to define a pathway forward for them to transition for civilian disaster or military use. I hope that some of these joining us today can help define this path. Again, thank you for joining us and being part of this visionary work. I look forward to hearing about the demonstration and the questions that follow as soon as I return. Good luck to the team. Sincerely, Colonel Jeremy Pamplin, Commander Tatrick. So, thank you for those words. And we all are keeping Colonel Pamplin, Erica Pamplin, and their family in our hearts. And he really wishes he could be part of this. All right. Next slide, please. And so just a quick reminder, since we have quite a wide audience for this, Tatrick is the Telemedicine and Advanced Technology Research Center. Our mission is to fuse data, humans, and machines into trustworthy solutions that optimize warfighter performance and casualty care. And our vision is automating casualty care to maximize medical decision space. And I think you'll see a lot of that in our work today. Next slide. And so it's always good to start with what we're trying to accomplish today. And the first thing that we want to do is really illustrate the use and value of a system of systems combining multiple technologies for delivering care, supporting care, visualizing care, etc., using open standards and a device agnostic platform to get after just the sort of scenarios, mass casualty scenarios that Colonel Pamplin described. We also want to highlight today how we work differently to get after this. The work that we're describing today has really occurred in the last 18 months. The first MDO OTA was awarded in May of 2021, and this work has happened since. To do this, we've used something called the DIAC, the Device Interoperability and Autonomy Coordinating Center, as well as leveraged existing work in standards and the playbook for threat modeling medical devices. Finally, we're going to talk about key follow-on efforts to really capitalize on this work. Next slide. So when we think about mass cal events, whether it be a hospital like this small one that is overrun with COVID patients during a surge, or a bombing, or a shooting, or a hurricane or disaster, they have some things in common. Next slide. Floods, earthquakes, pandemics, war. Next, please. Next, please. They're all characterized by research limitations in expertise, principally. And when we started this work in March of 2020, laying out this portfolio, we saw this as really the critical challenge at hand. Again, both for the pandemic and also for large-scale combat operations, mass casualties, and MDO. How do we extend expertise to expand capability and capacity to places that don't inherently have that? And how do we do it in a very fast way? Next slide, please. And so we laid out 3 lines of effort. The first is delivering that expertise from anywhere to anywhere using organic hardware like smartphones that can operate on organic networks like the cell network and have a minimum set of capabilities to operate in well-connected and not well-connected places. And then a second line of effort to build capability and capacity on top of that. We'll call it hospital-like capabilities. And that really is going to be the main focus of today. And third, how do we take all of that data and use it both to provide situational awareness at echelon and to optimize resource allocation? Next slide. And over the course of the last 2 years, we've done this in the real world, deployed it, and have supported over 60 hospitals across the nation, representing over 1,000 patients and nearly 5,500 patient days. Most recently, we've supported a variety of community sites for COVID testing and test to treat as the nation's only federal test to treat facilities in the country. And we've also brought this into military exercises and experimentation activities, where we have worked with hundreds of clinicians over hundreds of encounters and gotten amazing feedback in these types of events. We've also gained commendation from the Senate Armed Services Committee on not just what Tatrick and Netson have done, but how we've worked differently to accomplish it, and how this can be used to accelerate our current and future digital health and telehealth applications throughout the military health system. Next slide. Next slide. So the subject of today is really focusing on how does this relate to multi-domain operations. And for those outside of this direct domain, as we close, as we turn the page on Afghanistan and Iraq, we really need to think about what's called multi-domain operations, where long delayed and unavailable evacuation is what we can expect. Dispersed deep fires, the large scale injuries and casualties, as we've seen in places like Ukraine, and all sorts of creative unknowns. They really stress us when we aren't working in a focused area, and we need to really focus on two key problems and solve for them at the same time: prolonged care and massive casualties. Again, this is what was characterized by our COVID pandemic, but also other types of disasters where we need to extend expertise for people to care for patients much longer than they would prefer to, as well as deal with lots of casualties at the same time, capability and capacity. Next slide. Our Army health system concepts for the future really focus on how we can apply technology and specifically automation to these challenges. And this is a slide that we could spend the entire discussion on, but needless to say, it talks about a system of system, talks about reach back to get expertise outside of theater. It talks about automation, both in casualty care and in surgery. And many of the concepts here are directly applicable to this, are part of a journey to what we call the optimized human-machine teaming. Again, solutions for two things: reducing casualties and increasing caregiver capability and capacity. Human-machine teams we use experimentation to get from what we have today to concepts of the future. And we refine those concepts based on what we learn along the way. And it's not one step, it's a journey. What we have learned, and General Richardson in the most recent Army Medical Modernization Strategy, is that we need to work differently. The current processes aren't able to keep pace with the current threat environment. We need to think about this as a system of systems that not only includes the Army, but our joint partners, and seamless link between administrative and clinical, the DoD, the VA, civilians, and coalition partners, and leans heavily on common data standards and messaging formats. I think you're going to see a lot of that today as we describe our work here. And specifically, I just want to talk about how we usually work and how we've worked differently during this project. In the left, you'll see how we usually work, which is to work on advancing one project at a time and then integrating them, we hope, into a system of systems. What we've done here is accelerated the process by bringing the key players, whether they're interoperability experts, usually competing manufacturers, regulators, and clinicians together in something that we call the Device Interoperability and Autonomy Coordinating Center. Through this, we've created a safe collaborative space where we can work with standards, common workflows, common risk assessment formats, and have coordinated development and testing of systems that are built from the start to work as a system of systems and address things like cybersecurity interoperability, and those common standards upfront. The key to this is really what we call our three-legged stool. And so when we kicked this off, we said, we can't do everything. We can't get to 2035 now. And the answer is yes, if we need to. So in conclusion, and so the three-legged stool really is based on, value for the care model of combination of telecritical care and additional capability, a regulatory path, and making sure that there is the resource to do it. And we didn't have unlimited resources. So I want to thank everyone for their participation and attendance today. It is a busy time of year, and I know that it's important. We have tremendous progress in a short amount of time. This is 18 months of work by working differently and working together. And I challenge everybody today, please think about a standards-based system of systems that we're demonstrating can be applied to your challenges, whether it's MDO, combat casualty care, Ebola, monkeypox, or many other things. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Goldman and on with the show. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Matt. That was really a nice surprise to see a letter from Colonel Pamplin. All right, now the next phase of today's demonstration will be a bit of background and information to set the context for the work that we have been performing as a team. And then we will be going around to different people demonstrating different capabilities. So a little bit of history. Back around 2013, when there were concerns about Ebola arriving in the U.S. and our state level of preparedness for it, a request had come out of OSTP in collaboration with someone who is part of this session today, Dr. Shoman Datta. And that request was around what could we do today to leverage existing technology to improve our preparedness posture and care for patients for a disease like Ebola or other pandemic. And it really was framed as a larger picture of another pandemic. Around that time, a group of 19 collaborators quickly joined together over a 20-day period and worked in our older lab, picture that you see here and that you can watch videos online on WCVB, to look at how we could leverage technology to improve the care of patients and the safety of caregivers. And we focused at that time on the concept of adding remote control capability to medical devices. So what would that do? Well, if a caregiver could remain outside the patient's room, even for a brief period, while they are donning their PPE, they could more rapidly respond to an urgent patient need. That need might be the need to adjust a ventilator, perhaps to increase the oxygen delivery. It could be to alter an infusion pump rate. And perhaps a number of unnecessary entries to the room for a relatively simple task like that could be avoided entirely and could reduce the consumption of PPE. So there are many potential benefits that are really have become self-evident, but there were many concerns at the time. And at that time, what really energized the project was the participation of the FDA. And there are folks from the FDA who were involved at that time who are also participating today and who have participated in this project. Another component of that work that also helped energize it was that it was plugged into the NSF's Smart America Closed Loop Healthcare Initiative. So I think just looking at the timeline and thinking about these kind of capabilities, it's understandable that it has taken quite a while to appreciate the value of enhanced technology capabilities, appreciate the complexity within the healthcare ecosystem from a regulatory standpoint, safety, development of technology, and so forth. And although we won't spend time today presenting this, and I do urge you to review material from last December, one of the companies that stood up and responded to this need was Nihon Koden Orange Med, that developed remote control capability, which was implemented in a very focused way to allow for control of the ventilator from immediately outside the patient room using line of sight communication. Well, as we were all hit with the COVID pandemic, hospitals scrambled to address the need to do the things we just talked about, but without widely available technology. So in this photo taken from the internet, you could see how many infusion pump systems were moved into the hallway with long extension tubing to reach the patient's bedside. And some hospitals also stretched the wiring to the extent that they could for ventilators to try to bring the ventilator control panel outside the room. And they all, were trying to drive to the same thing: improve access to the medical devices themselves, to the user interface, to more quickly make necessary changes for patient care. And another challenge was they couldn't hear, and we still can't, hear devices that are inside a room with a closed door unless the system is designed to send the data to a remote alarm system. And given that so many devices today can and so many cannot because they're not interoperable, it can be difficult to rapidly deploy solutions like this to respond to a public health emergency. I'd like to be clear, this problem still remains, but we are going to show a solution pathway that is on that journey started back in 2013 and continuing through this day, that's been accelerated by all of the elements that Matt Quinn presented before. Now, a little bit of history again, for those of you who are joining us now for the first time for this final demonstration. In May of 2020, the research portfolio started, as Matt outlined, regarding NETSIN, MDO for medical device interoperability and autonomy, and for the DIAC, that whole portfolio. Then in December of 2021 was our first technology demonstration, and another demonstration was performed in August of 2022 of CPAM, the cross-platform application module, which enables pervasive interoperable data to be accessible for virtual critical care. The CPAM is part of the infrastructure that's invisible. It's part of the things you don't see in a city, like lighting and plumbing and so forth, but enables things to work. So back in December of 17th, if you view these demonstrations online, you'll recognize this first slide and the logo: remote control of ventilators and infusion pumps to support disaster care. And we demonstrated a number of connected sites in December 2021, including Madigan Army Medical Center, our lab here at MGH, Nihon Kohden Orange Med, and Thornhill Medical in Toronto, Canada. In that demonstration, and the links are here so you can watch the demonstration online. This outlines the 6 simulations that were performed in December. Well, the work has continued since then, and today we are building on the work to date and enhancing the capabilities available. Matt Quinn mentioned the importance of leveraging existing standards and building new standards as needed to drive and support work like this. You will hear mentioned today the concept of ICE, the Integrated Clinical Environment, which is an architecture for a patient-centric network. That architecture is leveraged in the scenarios that you'll see. Other standards, and in fact, many standards are necessary to get the job done. Other important standards include a middleware standard by OMG for DDS, which is widely used by the US military for high performance and high reliability systems. Also, during the pandemic, AAMI facilitated the development of a number of standards, including emergency use guidance for remote control of medical devices. That standard was rapidly completed in the spring of 2020, and we have been building on that since then, leveraging the research performed and shown today to build out and publish a more complete standard for adoption by industry. The FDA played a critical role in advancing this work by enabling industry to add remote control to existing medical devices by publishing 3 immediate in effect guidance documents in the spring of 2020. You can see through there are many other documents that were published, but the 3 pertinent ones are here, and that is the document for ventilators, infusion pumps, and also for monitoring equipment. And all of this is available online, of course. We alluded to the continued maturation of capabilities from the first demonstration through today, and obviously there isn't enough time to go through this entire chart, but we will revisit this at the end of today's presentation. As you can see, just to give you the lay of the land, These are only the major capabilities. Many of them are explained as TRLs, technology readiness levels. For example, the first line, far remote active monitoring and control of the ventilator, the NKB 550. And the right columns show the capability at the start in December 21, and now here today. And some of these are TRLs, which are technology readiness levels, and some of them are labeled with KRL because they're knowledge products. Again, won't go through the whole list, but this will be available when you watch later on. Today's demonstrations are the first one that I mentioned, which will be far remote control of multiple medical devices for a mass casualty event, with the simulation occurring in a tent, which is simulating a medical field hospital to provide role 2 of care at Fort Detrick at Tatrick. And that management is going to be performed by a consulting intensivist located in Seattle, Washington. That's going to be Dr. Colombo. The next simulation is also going to be based out of Fort Detrick, and that will be far remote management of casualties during en route care or medical evacuation by an unmanned aerial vehicle, a UAV, and that will also be performed remotely from Seattle. Then that patient is going to be, we will simulate the transport of that patient by UAV from Fort Detrick to MGH and arrive here in our admitting area. And that purpose of that element of the demonstration is going to be to demonstrate the new capability of data continuity and automated documentation from multiple vendors, that is interoperable data acquisition and control across the continuum of care from role 2 through medical evacuation to arrival in the hospital. Then we're going to shift gears and demonstrate the research on having a single user interface to enable integration of control and information from multiple infusion pumps from multiple manufacturers and an ICU ventilator and a patient monitor. And that will be performed in the area right behind me in our lab. Then we'll shift gears again to number 5. Number 5 will have 3 components. We're going to further explain the challenges that relate to remote control of medical devices. That is the safety challenges that we have to deeply investigate and understand and then address. In particular, for example, the challenge of avoiding having 2 people try to control the same device from 2 different locations. The next 5B will be a demonstration of how we test medical devices and networks to assure the performance will be maintained even over long distance communication over the internet. And then we'll wrap up with a cybersecurity analysis, and that will be presented by a combination of a team from MITRE and from DocBox. Now, you will be hearing a lot of names and a reference to a lot of people and companies, and so we have 2 slides to help you identify these folks. You already saw Matt Quinn in the upper left, and here I am speaking, I'm upper right, but we have a large team of experts collaborating here at MGH. You'll hear from Dr. Colombo during the simulations. You'll hear from or see some of the folks from DocBox, including Dr. Dane and Tracy Roush. And you may or may not hear, but there are people behind the scenes, including Dr. Du from Nihon Kohden and Meiran from Nihon Kohden. And on the second slide, you'll see that we have a lot of folks that have been working hard. It's a big list, including Derek Watt from Thornhill Medical, which manufactures one of the ventilators we'll be using, Stefan Bibian from Neurowave, from the US FDA, Doctors Weininger and Agler. From Deloitte, there's a team there as well because we will be using a Netson application for communication. That's how they will contact Dr. Colombo. Dr. Schlachta Fairchild, who's retired Army nurse and much more. Sorry if I'm minimizing your extensive role, who's been central to this, and of course the team at MITRE, who you are seeing and hearing from. And this isn't everyone. We ran out of room on the slides. So number 1, we're going to look at remote control to manage, support, and evacuate mass casualties at Fort Detrick. And there will be 3 components of that. I already alluded to this. The first will be managing the patient in the role 2 area after arrival, and then managing the patient en route, and then demonstrating data continuity. Now, we are using these terms a lot, and it's actually worth taking a moment to think about this with a slide. Let's say you have a patient in a patient room or wherever that patient might be, and you have a ventilator near the patient. Well, you can interact with the ventilator by standing near the ventilator in the patient's room. You also could have remote control in the room or possibly right outside the patient's room. And we call that near patient or local remote control. And in fact, there are devices that can be remotely controlled from inside a room. In an OR, for example, where you may have multiple places to control the same medical device. So these are things, there are certain issues or risks that may come up when you do that. For example, maybe you're adding a new connection to the device to enable remote control. As you move remote control farther away, and here we're calling this far remote control, naturally, everyone could envision that there are new challenges. For example, the person performing remote control can't see the patient any longer. So maybe there's a camera on the patient, or maybe there isn't. They may not be able to watch the medical device and see how it's operating. Maybe there's a problem with the patient's blood pressure and they're increasing the rate of infusion of medication. If the blood pressure doesn't increase, the problem may not be that the patient needs more medication. The problem may be that the IV isn't working correctly. Maybe it disconnected. So there are reasons to have eyes on the patient, eyes on the equipment. So in thinking about adding these new capabilities to enable new life-saving features and capabilities, we have to consider what the new challenges are and what the new risks are and address those. These definitions are from the standard under development within AMI, and here's the definition for far remote control and a definition for near remote control. And I'll say that these are under development with a very active committee meeting every other week so that we can drive this standard to publication. So let's begin with the first simulation. So we have a casualty, an injury, perhaps by a blast injury, and I think this is accompanied by a rollover of a vehicle. The medics arrive and perform TCCC, or Tactical Combat Casualty Care. They then move the casualty from the point of injury to the field hospital. And in the NATO designation, this is a Roll 2 field hospital. And in fact, this will be occurring live in the TATRIC simulated field hospital. We'll be going there in just a moment. The patient will be cared for in the field hospital and ultimately will be evacuated using an M4 UAV medical evacuation pod, which was designed to be carried underneath the UAV. It docks underneath the UAV. And so you will watch and as this unfolds within that evacuation pod. So to tee up the first part of the simulation, here are the elements that you'll be seeing. On the left, you can see the multiple casualties arranged here in the Roll 2 area in the tent at the hospital. They're monitored, they're on ventilators, and they are connected at each bedside to a DocBox apiary platform, which is a commercial ICE system. This enables remote viewing of the data and ultimately remote control, as you'll see. They will also use one of the Netson platforms, which is a product provided by Deloitte, which has an authority to operate on the DoD system, which is why it's being used in this environment. And they'll use that to ring up, to find an intensivist. In this case, it will be Colonel Colombo. And then he will help them provide care for the patients. So with that, I'm going to stop my camera. I will stop sharing my slides. We're going to turn on the cameras and we'll hand over the scenario to Fort Detrick.
Hello? 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 I can't hear you. Hello?
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, Doc.
All right. Colonel Colombo, critical care. How may I help you, sir, ma'am?
I'm first class Turner here. I've got a ventilator alarm that's going off. I checked the system and I don't know what's going on.
Okay. Are you your patient hooked up to the DocBox apiary?
Yes, he's hooked up to the DocBox apiary and he's also hooked up to NKB 550 vents.
Okay. Let me just log in and I'll see if I can take a look and find him.
Appreciate it.
Okay. I see two patients in your hooked up to your DocBox. Just make sure we have the right patient here.
Should be a Randall Jones.
Roger. Date of birth 11 July 2000.
Correct?
Okay. Let's check in on that vent. See if we can't figure out what's going on for you.
I'd appreciate it, Doc.
All right, I see you have a high patient tidal volume to kilogram alarm. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yes, that is.
All right, tell me a little about your patient. What's happened to Mr. Jones?
Mr. Jones is suffering from blast injuries, so we have him on a vent.
Roger. Okay, I see he's on a pressure control mode, so that's going to give a variable tidal volume. And for our blast patients, we suspect blast lung. It's probably best to use what we call lung protective strategy. So we want to control the tidal volume primarily. So I'm going to put him on an assist control volume mode. And then how big is he? How much does he weigh approximately?
He weighs approximately 70 kilograms.
Okay, we're going to use a 6 cc per kilogram tidal volume. So entering 420. So it should be on assist control volume control mode. And your tidal volume should be 420 now.
Yep, looks like you made that change. Thank you, Doc.
All right.
Hey, how's it going? The medical evacuation pod has arrived, and I have a ventilator ready for you back.
All right, thank you. Hey, Doc, I got a quick question for you. Evac's here, ready to transport the patient. He good to go?
Yes, yeah, we're good to go. You want to go ahead and move him on the dock box as well?
Yeah, I'm gonna move him via the doc box. Thank you, Doc.
Outstanding. I'll stay available. Yep, I'll stay available, and if you guys need me, you just go ahead and give a call.
All right, thank you kindly, Doc.
Out here.
Okay, we're just going to provide a very brief intro as we shift to the second demonstration. And I'm also going to just go backward and show a quick recap of what everyone saw. So you saw the patients here, you saw the surrounding the patient, you saw the Nihon Koden NKV 550 ventilator, Neurowave IV pump, and the Philips monitor. And now the patient has been moved out to the pod because the medics were able to retrieve a transport ventilator from the pod to use now on that patient. And so this next phase, you'll see the patient in the pod with a medic sitting in the seat on the left with the casualty as they are en route to the MGH hospital. And so with that, we're going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to go over to the pod.
Doc, can you hear me?
Roger, I hear you.
Okay. My name is Specialist Matthew. I needed some assistance with a ventilated patient.
Of course, Matthews. What patient do you have? What's your location? And are they hooked up to the dock box?
Yes, the patient is hooked up to a dock box, a moved SLC, a ventilator, and a AccuPump.
Okay. Let me just get into your patient. See if we can help you out. Can you tell me a little bit about your patient while we're waiting for this to load up?
My patient is a blast injury. I contacted you today because they have hypotension, and I've tried increasing PEEP, however, hasn't resolved it. So I was wondering what I should do next.
All right, what was the PEEP and what did you change it to?
The PEEP was originally at 5, but I increased it to 15.
Okay. So if I can get in there, I may be able to adjust the PEEP for you. That's going up on PEEP on a blast patient is a good idea, but maybe not 5 to 15, maybe a little more. And what meds are they on?
They are currently on. They're on propofol at the moment.
Okay. Okay. Has that been recently increased, or what's that dose at? I'm gonna see if, again, I should be able to get in and control that and make some adjustments for you, but we're at the mercy of the matrix.
Propofol is currently at 21 milliliters per hour.
Okay. Yeah, just having a little trouble pulling this up. Oh, here we go. All right, I've got propofol at 21.
Yeah.
All right, is he moving around excessively or agitated?
No, the patient is still.
Okay. See if we can turn that down a little bit. So maybe that he's see, his fluid rate was low. That's a good idea in a blast patient to keep their lungs dry, but then sometimes they don't have enough volume on board to tolerate a higher peak.
I see the change in the propofol. I do not see the change in the PEEP.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the vent now. Verify the propofol at 15.
Propofol is at 15.
Roger. I'm going to drop your PEEP to 10. And sometimes they're a little bit low on fluid. They can't handle that big a jump in PEEP. And they're oxygenating well on 21%. So I think we have room. Let me just get a repeat set of vitals. And are they improved?
The vitals are improved. I see the reflected change in PEEP. The hypertension seems to be resolving. I appreciate your help.
Roger that. We're here if you need us. Good luck.
Thank you.
It looks like, not too surprisingly, the comms from the pod were a little shaky there and took a while to connect. I think that's another example of a real world scenario. The fact that they were able to connect ultimately was a good thing, and it showed the capabilities once you can establish that level of communication. So now you're back to seeing my slide set, and we're moving to the final element in this patient's journey, this casualty's journey to the hospital. So this is number 3, and the purpose of this section is to demonstrate data continuity and automated documentation from multiple vendor devices across the continuum of care. So remember that I'm going to go back just to point out again that when the casualty was initially treated in the Roll 2 area, the ventilator was an NKV 550, and the monitor was a Philips monitor, and the NeuroWave infusion pump. In the evacuation pod, there were different devices. Those devices were a combination ventilator and monitor from Thornhill Medical called the Moves SLC. And there was and so that provided, as I said, 2 things, monitoring and ventilation, and it was the same infusion pump. So now that the patient is arriving to the admitting area of the hospital on their way to the ICU, we will see whether we're able to review the data when the patient arrives. So let's start that scenario right now.
Yes, we are. Confirm the patient's date of birth.
Sure. I have a Randall Jones, July 11th, 2000.
Yep, the team has been expecting him. It looks like the team said he's been a little unstable during transport. Could you give an update on the patient's condition?
Yes, we had to call in a medical consult on the way here, but he's been stable so far.
Great. I'm going to pull up his data and get it to the care team. Dr. Goldman?
That's good.
Spilled my coffee. Yeah, what can I do? Yes. All right. Is this Mr. Jones? Who is this? Randall?
Yeah, Mr. Jones.
Okay, we were expecting him. I heard he had some instability during the medevac. What happened? And is he
Yes,
okay now?
We had to call in a medical consult on the way here, but he's been doing good.
Okay, all right. And you reviewed his data. I see that we can view it on the tablet here. Okay, great. Well, we have an ICU bed ready for him. So if you could just head down the hallway to room 72 and just straight down there. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Colin. All right. Well, that's the end of the patient's journey. And so things that were demonstrated, I think we hopefully articulated completely. And if not, there'll be opportunity for Q&A at the end of the presentation today. So now we're going to move to the next scenario, scenario number 4. I alluded at the beginning of the presentation to the idea of the value of controlling multiple devices from a single user interface. In fact, this was a specific request from our sponsors to develop a prototype as a research prototype to understand the potential safety issues, usability needs, and a host of performance aspects. And as the FDA has been partnering with the DIAC in this work, it's also provided an opportunity to have discussions with them about how to ensure what we can do to help support the safety of these systems. But when I say we, meaning the royal we for the health sector, since it's really the manufacturer's responsibility, and also hospitals and healthcare delivery organizations that implement these systems and may serve as system integrators. So a few points from the slide. You're going to see a single UI, and you'll see the details there. Also, what you won't see behind the scenes is that we're using OpenICE, which is an open source implementation of the Integrated Clinical Environment Standard developed by our lab and our team and is freely available to the research community. We use our lab and we use software like OpenICE as well as many other tools to prototype, to perform research, and to implement in an emulation environment. We also have specialized networking and related infrastructure, which you'll be seeing in one of the upcoming demonstrations, and specialized test beds for infusion pumps, networking, closed loop control, and also for cybersecurity in our cyber range. So we're going to perform this simulation in the simulated ICU, and I assume I'm on camera, right? Okay, hi. So here I am inside the ICU. There's the wall with the window. Here's our patient. Next to the patient is a ventilator. Again, it's an NKV 550 ventilator from Nihon Kohden. And there are multiple infusion pumps from different manufacturers, 3 infusion pumps, delivering a total of 4 IV fluids or medications. There's a syringe pump, the Alaris Ascena pump, NeuroWave AccuPump, which has 2 channels, and an Aton Sapphire pump with 1 channel. Next to that is a Philips MX800 patient monitor. So I'm going to disappear from this scene, and Dr. Arnie is going to represent the treating physician who is able to treat the patient who may have a communicable disease or maybe on reverse isolation, perhaps from a burn injury, and see what can be done from outside the patient's room.
Thank you, Dr. Goldman. So this demonstration is a follow-up from the system that we demonstrated last December, where we have a OpenICE open source implementation of our interoperability platform, which is able to visualize data from multiple devices and also simultaneously control multiple devices. So we have a OpenICE instance running at the bedside in the patient's room. And then here in front of me, we have our web portal, which connects to that bedside OpenICE system and allows a remote clinician, in this case, a near remote clinician, to be able to see information and control the devices. We've got three main panels here. At the top, we have patient information. We have ventilator monitoring and remote control, vital signs monitoring, where we see data from the Philips MX800, and then infusion pump remote control down here, where we're able to select and see those three infusion pumps, the Alaris Acina NeuroWave AccuPump and the Sapphire pump. So here with the ventilator monitoring and remote control, this is communicating with the NK550 in the room. And if you could please zoom in on the 550. I'm going to adjust the respiratory rate. So it's currently set to a respiratory rate of 20. You can see that on the remote control display here, and we can see it on the ventilator screen right there in the bottom in the middle, RR20. I'm going to change that to 17. I type it in, press OK, and immediately see that change on the ventilator, and it's now running at a respiratory rate of 17. We have that capability with several other parameters where we're able to set that and remotely control it. We can also see all the waveforms from it simultaneously. Over here with the vital signs monitoring from the Philips, I see the measurements from the patient, the vital signs, so systolic, diastolic pressures, SpO2, respiratory rate, and so on. These are being fed by the patient simulator that you see through the window in the room, the orange box there. And I can see looking at this, well, the pressures are a bit low. There's just been a sudden drop in pressure. And so to address that, I'm going to go to the NeuroWave AccuPump. I've got two channels in that pump. It can deliver two drugs simultaneously. Channel 1 is norepinephrine. That's a vasodilator that's going to help raise their blood pressure. Channel 2 is saline, which is saline and not going to have a huge impact on their blood pressure, but I'll demonstrate controlling both. So first thing I'm going to do is double the infusion rate of the norepinephrine. I'm going to go from 4 milliliters per hour to 8. That's the top channel. You see in the center of the little circle there that it's running at 4 currently. Put in 8 here, put in the new volume to be infused, and click Program Channel 1. And that immediately changes to 8, and now it's delivering the drug at twice the rate. And I'm also going to give a small fluid bolus. It seems like a good idea to me. So I'm going to do a bolus of 8 milliliters so that it's very quick for this demonstration. I'm going to do that at a rate of 800 milliliters per hour. So it's only going to run for a few seconds to give that 8 milliliters. So I click Program Channel 2, and we see the pump mechanism start to spin much faster. It's just had a huge increase in rate. And it's going to count down the amount that it's infused, and we'll see that on our remote display, and it'll automatically stop after it's delivered that entire 8 milliliters. This generic user interface for controlling, if I scroll back up, I can also see that miraculously our patient's blood pressure has improved as a reaction to this treatment, and so things are improving. We're going in the right direction with these changes. This generic interface for infusion pump remote control is based on working with these pumps and looking at specifications for other pumps, and based on the use scenarios that have come out of the Netson community. We use those to build a set of required or necessary or desirable communications elements from the pumps, things that we wanted to be able to read from the pumps or control remotely. And we compiled those in a medical device information data sheet, or MDIDs, for controllable pumps. So the NeuroWave does the best job of implementing all of these. It basically covers everything that we would want from the MDIDs. And we can see that we get the drug name, we see the concentration of the drug, current rates for current values for a lot of different settings. And we're able to remotely set those, and we're able to read that information from the pump. The other two pumps, the Alaris Acina and the Sapphire pump, were not developed with the intended use of being remotely controlled. They weren't built for these kinds of use cases. They're more general purpose pumps that happen to have a controllable interface. The Acina pump that I've selected now is available on the European market. It does have a port where we can control the speed, but that's kind of all we can do is change the infusion rate and the volume to be infused. So we can change that, for instance, here it's set to 2. I'm going to change that to 4. So give a volume to be infused and click program, and it'll go ahead and change the rate of that pump. It's now infusing at 4. And it's the same user interface here. We can see we don't get all of the data elements that we get from the NeuroWave. We don't even see the drug name. And for safely controlling infusions remotely, knowing what drug it is pretty important. That's one of the things that you would really need to see. But we are able to work with this pump, even though it wasn't built for these kinds of use cases, using that interface that's available. Similarly, with the Q-Core Sapphire, we can change the rate remotely. So I can change that from a rate of 3 to a rate of 8. Just click program. It'll push through. Again, we've got only one thing where we can actually make a change to the pump. We can only change the rate, and it's not populating most of the boxes. So that's how we've handled the difference in capability of these different pumps between a pump that's built and really intended for these kinds of uses versus something that happens to have an interface that allows some capability but doesn't support everything that we need. We simply show that the fields are not populated. We don't have the user interface widget to be able to enter values for things that we can't command. This has been a demonstration of what we call near patient remote control. I'm here outside the room. I have clear visual. I can clearly see the patient. I can clearly see the devices. I can, if I need to, put on my protective equipment and walk into the patient's room if I need to touch something or adjust something or fix something. This is a web-based user interface, though, and could be run from anywhere. And some of the other questions that we've been considering are what happens when you have a remote clinician, maybe in another state, and they are also trying to control the devices at the same time as a clinician who's either in the room with the patient using the bedside system or just outside the room. How do we handle those kinds of contention? And so our next demonstration will be an illustration of a technical mitigation that we've built to help to improve the safety of those kinds of situations.
Thank you very much, Dave. So before we begin the next demonstration, which will be, as you can see, remote control safety and performance, specifically competition for control, as Dave mentioned, going to embellish this a little bit with some of the work and considerations that have been underway. So management for competing control, what you're going to see in the demonstration will be a Sapphire infusion pump connected to a local bedside ICE implementation. So that's going to be the local or bedside remote control. And then next to it will be a computer screen, which is using web-based remote control, meaning that web control could be anywhere in the world, as we saw earlier today. So digging into this a little bit, let's look at some of the notion about risk management for medical device remote control. So we're working from a certain premise. The premise is that the medical devices themselves that we're using, such as the ventilators, infusion pumps, and whatnot, are being added to devices that are already FDA cleared. So we're not starting from the ground up. These are devices that are known to be safe and effective. So based on that premise, we're now considering coordinated risk management across the ecosystem. There are responsibilities for different stakeholders. So device manufacturers have to assure that adding remote control does not compromise the device safety and performance. So they, again, think through this. They have an existing medical device, one of the ones that we looked at. Now they have to add new software. They have to add new features, new user interface, a number of things that they know are important to consider and that are being identified as we move through this. So they know how to do this. They know how to build medical devices, and they know how to make sure that if they add new software, new capabilities, it doesn't compromise the device safety. So as a collaborative team, we're looking at new risks that arise from using remote control in clinical workflows that are different than was assumed with standard standalone devices, right? We're taking something that where a deep understanding was obtained to build the medical device, understanding exactly how an infusion pump will be used with a patient, operated by a nurse, by a physician, by others. And now we are, opening Pandora's box with all sorts of new use cases. So that takes a team to think through. Then we have to assure the availability and sufficiency of device data to enable safe remote control. For example, most physicians, most clinicians, respiratory therapists in particular, would be very hesitant to change the settings on a ventilator if they could not see the real-time waveforms from the ventilator, the airway pressure waveform, flow waveform, etc. For other devices, it may not be critical to see all that data. And so you have to really think through the purpose of the device and its changes, and also the risk-benefit ratio of what you could see. Now, do you have to see those waveforms on a smart display of some kind on a computer? Well, not necessarily, because as we pointed out, you could look through the window if you're doing this from right outside the patient's room. But if you're doing it from far away, certainly there has to be a way to see the data if it's essential. And then it's important to select device features that can be safely controlled remotely. For example, in the work that we've done together here, there are certain features that in collaboration with Nihon Kohden, the experts there pointed out, it's not necessarily the best idea to start off controlling a very subtle setting that only certain experts are actually able to set, even at the bedside. And when setting it, it's important to be able to observe the patient and their response. So that's a really good example of, identifying these things with the level of expertise required. Then, of course, it's important to assess the impact of network quality and what that might have on the performance of the system. And I think we've, obviously, ultimately, you have to consider cybersecurity threats along with any implementation like this for reasons that are self-evident. So what are some of the critical safety implications for remote control technologies? Well, we talked about altering what is called in the standard and the work we've been doing, altering the locus of control, the location where you're performing the control, from touching the device and its built-in user interface, to doing it outside the patient's room, to doing it further away. We have to consider contention or competing control. We don't want to have dueling control of a device and not know who's in charge of that control. And I think we've touched on these other points on the slide. So one of the tools that are used to study something like this is something called a safety assurance case. The safety assurance case approach has been used in safety critical industries for many years, especially popularized in the UK in the rail industry, also in nuclear. And the FDA over the last 10 or 15 years really pushed for its application to IV infusion pumps because there were a host of safety issues and they thought this approach would be useful. So we've been able to leverage the expertise and the experience that it was gained in the application of safety assurance cases to intravenous infusion pumps and generalize that to the use case of what we talked about, which is you take an existing medical device that already is safe, it's already on the market, now you want to add remote control capability. And so using this, I don't know if, obviously no one could read the little text at the bottom, but this shows you how you can incorporate the information in an approach in which you produce an argument in which you say, I can prove that remote control of the device is going to be safe because, and then fill in the blank. And so to do this and to do it thoroughly, and this tool does open up every different aspect of control. It's a way to really see everything for any topic for safety. And one has to look at all of the things on the right, a clear definition of the goals, implementation of the development, and so forth. So looking down into this tree, just to give you a flavor for what this is like, as you dig deeper with these different claims at the top, a claim here is the device has adequately mitigated the risks arising from interactions with the new user interface, or what we call in the standard an auxiliary HMI, human machine interface. How would you prove that claim? How do you really what are the assumptions and what is the evidence? And so under this is a list of that, and you see you can see the list. And here one of the claims is expanded. And it says the device has adequately mitigated the risks associated with contention of the control, meaning that there is a means that the manufacturer has built into the device to make sure that you don't have someone standing at the device trying to make a change while someone remotely is trying to make a change as well. And so there may be many different ways of addressing it, and we are not trying to dictate to manufacturers how to implement that, but we certainly want to explore possible solutions and do that with industry, with regulatory agencies, with the standards organizations and the academic community, so that there is a shared knowledge base of pre-competitive information that paves the road to enable more rapid development of these devices at lower risk and at lower cost and make them available for patient care. The work that's going on is shared in a number of ways, especially with the standards community. And specifically, we have been sharing information with the AMI remote control community, using the information to build out medical device interface data sheets, which are lists of the necessary inputs and outputs for a device to support safety. This will become a standard. The information is shared with a very large IEEE 1173 medical device informatics standards portfolio. Dr. Stephen Dane is on the call and part of this team, and he is a leader in those areas with the 1173 work. Also, of course, this is being shared with for the future revision of the standard for the integrated clinical environment. And there is a completion of a black box recorder standard in which all the information is recorded, all the device interactions. And so we won't go any further into details there, but that was all to help set the stage for what Dave Arney, who's our lead engineer in our team, is going to present in this scenario. And we're going to switch over now to the video with Dave, and I will hand him the mic.
Thank you. So we're going to show another demonstration of infusion pump control. It's a little bit different setup here, so I'll walk through the pieces. We have a Sapphire infusion pump, and we have two computers set up here. One is the near patient computer. This would be in the bedside, immediately outside the room, somewhere in the patient's vicinity. And then we have a far remote computer. And the scenario might be something like Dr. Goldman mentioned at the beginning, where you have an overcrowded rural hospital, you've got medically complicated patients, and you may not have intensivists or other highly trained specialists locally. And so you're calling on a remote expert for help. So there is a clinician at the bedside who's capable of operating the equipment, taking care of the patient, and they're getting some help in optimizing drug delivery and settings for the care of this specific patient. So we have on the bedside computer, we're running our OpenICE platform. We have one infusion pump connected, which is this Sapphire infusion pump, and we're running a pump remote control manager application. So in this application, we can choose our infusion pump, and we can see that the pump control status message is currently set to by pump. What that means is that the rate that the pump is running at, which is 25 milliliters per hour, was programmed in using the touch panel of the pump, was programmed in using the pump's user interface rather than through the application or the remote control. And we can see what the current infusion rate is, that it's 25. And we have a box here where we can set that. And so we're going to type in a new rate of 30, click set, and that will go through and change the rate of the pump to 30. That usually takes a few seconds to go through. The beep from the pump means that it's received the command, and now it's running at a rate of 30. On the far remote, we're showing the sign-in screen currently. Right now we're using Google accounts to manage credentials and authentication. So we log in, and now it's got the identity information for the remote clinician. We're able to see an infusion pump remote control screen, what the device is, the unique device identifier for the device, and the status. And the status now has changed to near patient. That's also reflected on the other screen at the bedside computer. And that means that the last command to the pump came from the near patient computer where we typed in the value and set it here. On the remote, we're able to see the pump settings, and we're also able to type in a new rate there. So here we'll type in a rate of 40, confirm, and submit that request. Now, we could get ourselves into trouble here. If the bedside clinician really thinks it should run at 30 and the remote clinician really thinks it should run at 40, what prevents them from ping-ponging back and forth and adjusting that rate up and down, or changing the rate without the bedside clinician knowing what's going on? We built this believing that the bedside clinician has the best situational awareness of the patient's status and has access to information that the remote clinician doesn't have. They can see and touch the patient. And so we've decided that the bedside clinician has ultimate control over what the device should do. So they get a pop-up message of a confirmation that says that there's been a remote control request, that remote user Yi Zhang wants to control the pump. There's a request sequence ID, and ask the question, grant the control, yes or no. So we'll go through, click yes to grant control. That will then allow that rate of 40 to get pushed through to the pump. And the pump control status here changes to far remote. And that's reflected in both places. They both agree that the pump is under far remote control. Now, because the bedside user has ultimate control, we can go back here on the bedside computer, type in either that rate of 30 again or a new rate, and set the pump. So we'll change it to 20 and set. And there's no confirmation. We don't require the remote user to authorize the local user's commands. It's only when the remote user starts to issue commands. We want to make sure that the bedside provider knows who it is who's making those requests and explicitly authorizes that. The local user can always use this interface to change the pump without requiring external permission. And so that local mitigation helps to take care of several problems, including making sure that the local clinician knows what's happening to their patient, that they retain control over the devices, and making sure that they know exactly who is requesting that remote control and being able to work with them. This helps to inform, or this work was informed by, and in turn helps to further inform our risk management work and assurance case development, and really builds on a lot of the lower level networking work that we're going to show in our next piece.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, and for our next demonstration, so as you can see in my slide, just a recap a little bit, how important it is to perform the verification and validation of the entire system, not just one component, which is tricky. And we're using the capabilities in the lab to simulate that, as you'll see in a moment. So in this slide is the setup for what you're about to see. We will do this live. Excuse me. So what we're going to do is show some of the work that is required to perform pre-deployment assessment of a system. And today, during the demonstration from the evacuation pod, you saw the challenges that could occur with an unstable network. And we do some of that simulation and testing in the lab. And we can push any system to failure. And we've done that for a number of systems within the Netson portfolio. So the way this system is set up in this test bed is we have, we will show a dock box, which you see in the picture on the right, which is connected to the Nihon Koden ventilator, the NKV550. The ventilator is ventilating a test lung. And with this setup, we're able to, at any point in this connection, we're able to disrupt the network traffic. We could add delays, jitter, do other things to the network traffic, affect it in only one direction or bidirectionally. So we will do that with this setup that you see here in the slide, and we'll go live now for the demonstration. So now we're going to take the slide off, and we're going to go to this camera live. And this is the same setup that you just saw in the slide. Here's the mechanical lung being ventilated by the ventilator. And next to it is a bedside dock box that's connected directly to the ventilator. Now, the thing that we're going to focus on in this demonstration is going to be responsiveness of a system. What happens when you introduce a network delay, and what could be affected is responsiveness. So the first thing that we're going to see with regard to responsiveness is we'll look at the performance of different equipment. So this is the ventilator. Now, normally when someone uses a ventilator, and I'm going to tap the lower left button, and as you can see, the lower two letters say VC, which is a volume control setting for ventilation. I'll tap it, and of course the ventilator is very responsive, as it should be, and right away it responds. And notice it's still in VC mode. Next to it is the dock box. And what Yi is going to do is he's going to show the responsiveness of the button on DocBox. And let's just make sure that do we have a nice crisp image there? Great. And now watch my finger where it says VC. and you just changed it to PC, which is pressure control. So we had not only a responsive connection, but we also had a responsive screen on the dock box. And we'll go back one more time. He's going to tap it. You see the responsiveness goes to volume control mode. Look at my finger. It goes from PC to VC. So the control worked. That's remote control, and it's near patient remote control from that dock box. Now we're going to add a little more complexity. We're going to add a web interface into the mix. And now you see the web interface. It's a DocBox web interface on the screen. And now Dave is going to click with his mouse and make the same change that you just made at the bedside. And my finger is pointing to the same spot to just help you follow along. And you can see it got a lot smaller. So, but Dave just changed it to PC. So Dave, do that again, and you can see the responsiveness of the web interface to making the same controls. And of course, he can be anywhere since it's running over the internet. Okay, now we're going to add to this, and we're going to add another screen that we're going to add to the mix. And this is a screen of a dedicated specialized network appliance installed in the lab that lets us manipulate the network traffic. Dave Guffrey, who's working behind the scenes, is going to add a 500 millisecond delay to this. Now, as I said, there are many different tests that can be performed, but in the interest of time, we're doing one. So once the delay has been activated, we'll get the signal, and then we'll run through the same test again. And here it is. So we got the thumbs up. The delay has been inserted, 500 milliseconds. Now, what we're going to see, watch Dave's screen. He's going to go slowly to show you. He's going to click to change the setting from volume control to pressure control. And it might be a bit more sluggish. In our tests, we can see it's not as crisp sometimes. And he'll click that, and we'll see what happens. And he clicks, and he saves. And if you see, it's going to change from PC to VC, or volume control, over here. And the change has been made. So in this case, as you can see, it's essentially imperceptible, and the function has been preserved. So this lets us say with assurance that the system can perform with a 500 millisecond delay. As I mentioned before, we've performed all different kinds of tests, and we try to break every system, and we try to break it not so we could feel good about it, but so we can provide the information back to each manufacturer to let them know specifics about their system or their component in the system and its performance. And it's been, we've been told by manufacturers that it's been quite helpful, and they make changes as a result. Of course, we do this in partnership with them so that everyone could have more reliable and safer systems. So with that, we're going to return now in a moment to back to the slides, and Matt Weir is going to present, Matt Weir from MITRE is going to present the cybersecurity threat analysis and enhancements that have been performed. And Matt, here's the mic and computer. I don't know, given your area of expertise, I don't know if I can trust you with it. Let's see what happens.
Thank you very much, Dr. Goldman. I'm Dr. Matt Weir. I'm with the MITRE threat modeling team. And I'm going to here to talk to you a little bit about the cybersecurity concerns that we had with this system here and how we addressed them. So looking back at the demos that you just saw, I'm sure you can all start to think about different issues when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to providing remote medical care to patients. What the threat modeling process really wants to focus on is how do we identify those threats in a systematic way? And then how do we also work with performers in order to address those threats, both with security controls and with other types of mitigations as well, in order to be able to accomplish the mission safely and securely. So the MITRE threat modeling team for this process here followed the framework that's laid out in the playbook for threat modeling medical devices. This is a guide that MITRE produced along with the Medical Device Innovation Consortium, and it was sponsored by the FDA to bring threat modeling early on into the medical device development lifecycle. And I was really happy to see how much Tatrick and DocBox have embraced this FDA guidance here in order to really integrate threat modeling into their development process of building this capability. Now, the playbook for threat modeling medical devices categorizes the different activities that you perform for threat modeling by using 4 different questions. Question number 1 is, what are we working on? And this involves, partnering with all the different participants of the system in order to develop a shared understanding of what we're trying to threat model. Question number 2 is, what can go wrong? This is the threat portion of threat modeling. And it really looks at, having structured methodology in order to identify different threats that, the system can encounter. Question number 3 is probably the most important one. It's what are we going to do about it? So it's looking at, all of the previous threats that you've identified and coming up with different mitigations and security controls in order to be able to deal with that. Now, not every single threat is going to be eliminated. So a part of this is also looking at how do you go ahead and, develop different risk mitigation strategies in order to be able to accomplish a mission at the end of the day. And finally, question number 4 is, did we do a good job? And what this question really does is provide a lot of different feedback loops in order to improve the threat modeling process over time, because the threat modeling process has to be able to evolve as the system is evolving as well. So initially, like as the system is being built out, and there may be a lot of design decisions that are currently they're going between. And so the threat modeling process often then takes more of a, tabletop type of approach to identify threats. As the system becomes more mature, you can start to integrate other different types of threat identification techniques, such as penetration testing or, other types of feedback loops as well. So here is one of the diagrams that the threat modeling team produced as part of our analysis of the system that really highlights the different trust boundaries between the different components. Now, I know there's a lot going on here, okay? And that's actually part of the reason why I want to be able to show this to you, because I think it really highlights some of the system nature of this whole capability that we're building out right now. So I'm going to take you through a very quick high-level walkthrough of this diagram. So on the very left here is the patient. And this is, at the end of the day, this is the most important part of our entire threat model. Every single time we think about, anything about the potential impact of it here, we really have to keep that patient's safety and well-being, at the center of all that we're doing. This patient will be connected to many different medical devices potentially. You saw this in all these demos here. These medical devices may be manufactured by different, manufacturers, and this adds a lot of complexity about how do you go ahead and get, have them all work together there correctly. Dave Arney mentioned a few of those there in his earlier presentation. Now, these medical devices are all connected to a local DocBox bedside device. And so this is responsible for being able to interface with them and, basically aggregate all that data together. This local bedside device then sends its data, and receives commands from the DocBox cloud services, which can be running, in the internet there. And these cloud services, in turn, can talk to many other types of external systems as well. So, for example, you may have interfaces between a hospital's, admit, discharge, and transfer system, and you may also be talking to other NetSyn, component critical services as well. So there's a lot of different, performers, a lot of different stakeholders, and you really have to be able to model how all these different groups are, interacting from a cybersecurity standpoint. And this is all really to enable your medical team, both local and remote, to be able to provide that care to that patient at the end of the day. So let's kind of transition a little bit and talk about the actual threat portion of this here as well. And to do this, let's go ahead and focus on the patient transfer process. So you saw this, happen a little bit earlier here between the Tatrick field site and the hospital here in Boston. So looking at this patient transfer process, there's a lot of different types of threats that I think probably immediately come to mind when you start thinking about this here. So, for example, you could have a spoofing attack where an attacker sends, fake patient data to the admitting service. You can have an information disclosure attack where, data is stolen about the patient and their care that they're receiving. And you can have even just a denial of service attack where stuff just doesn't work. Imagine that. So this is kind of a example of just some of the threats that can occur against this one particular process. The MITRE team looked at a whole lot of different other types of processes as well. And what we did was we focused on using structured techniques in order to understand this. So one of the primary ones we looked at was using what's called the STRIDE threat modeling technique. STRIDE stands for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and escalation of privileges. And what this really allows us to do is identify threats in a systematic way for a system that doesn't have a whole lot of publicly available threats available for it already. So this is really useful when you're trying to figure out a new capability or, some new feature that, you just don't have that public vulnerability list to be able to go against. And so what this helps us do then is make sure that those vulnerabilities don't occur in the future then too. So this has been a really good way for us to be able to identify the system. Another thing I really want to be able to highlight real quick too is that we have been able to, do this threat modeling process and evolve it as the system has been evolving as well with DocBox. So for example, with this patient transfer process here, we were not only able to do the threat modeling process from a kind of a tabletop standpoint, but we were able to partner with Mass General here and DocBox to be able to go ahead and do live testing here in this lab in order to validate these threats. This testing here, and the results from this here, we were able to feed back to DocBox and basically help generate requirements for them to be able to, further secure their system. And we've worked with them at DocBox as well in order to then identify different ways that they can go ahead and mitigate those threats. So this kind of this shows that, the threat modeling process, early on in developing the system here, really helps go ahead and build this out and make the system a safer one here. And to talk about that next step where, we are going ahead and, having this threat modeling process, improve the state of the system, I'm going to go ahead and hand this back to Tracy so she can talk about the work that she is doing in order to, secure the system here based upon the threat modeling information.
Thank you, Matt. So as he said, we were able to generate requirements from this. We actually partnered this with an analysis that was being done as part of the CPAM effort in order to start to receive a FedRAMP approval for the system. So we both looked at this from 2 points of what it would take to get through that FedRAMP process for the cloud, but also how do you take those requirements for the threat analysis and how do we bring those through? And this has actually allowed us to choose specific technologies that actually answer a lot of these questions. So some of the requirements that we've actually been able to do, we've actually solved via how our system is actually architected. So for example, the medical devices in the in the API platform actually don't integrate directly to the hospital network or the system network. They actually integrate to a local network. So that actually put another layer of defense in between the medical devices themselves onto the DocBox, not only to protect the hospital network from those systems, it also actually protect the network to those devices. So we put that isolation in place. Another thing that we've done is we've moved towards the implementation of DDS Secure. And this is a new part of the OMG standard that evolved. And so Julian, if you could go to the next slide. And so what that allows us to do is actually, data, to do entity authentications, because we're not only just dealing with human authentication, but we're also adding a bunch of devices into the system and different components into the system. So we were able to do entity authentication on this. We allow for access control, and we can actually limit those components to only speak to the domains and topics and partitions, which are some of the ways DTS is actually broken down. So we can actually limit these entities into smaller to smaller components to the system. So once you're into the system, you don't have full access to everything. It gives you the ability for data integrity and confidentiality. It also gives us the ability to have data origin authentication. And this is actually found throughout our system because we use the OMG standard actually to move through the system as a whole. So if you want to go to the next slide. Really, our next steps is we've incorporated a bunch of these requirements into our plan of action and milestones for security. And we're in the process of doing a DDS secure upgrade. That's actually being done under an ongoing DHA SBIR with RTI that we'll be finishing up in the next few months. And then really it's just going to be comprehensive testing of the system and continue to test, against that threat analysis to be able to show that the system is more secure than it was before. So I'll hand it back over to you, Julian.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Many capabilities were demonstrated today, and many of them have been deployed. Some are closer to adoption than others, some are already adopted, and some are farther in the future. Clearly, as you could see, one could adopt urgently needed solutions quite quickly because they were shown today. But also more RT-D&E is needed for widespread adoption, especially in non-urgent settings. And we won't go into detail on what that might require. However, kind of to return to where we started, where we listed major capabilities and maturity levels, And we really didn't talk about these different major capabilities. I think now that you've watched all the demonstrations, this chart makes a lot more sense. And it includes contention for control, local and remote control, network-based control, competing control, network instability and the implications of that. So we really dug into quite a bit of detail, including cybersecurity threat analysis and mitigations that have been performed to date, as well as those that need to be performed in the future. We welcome your questions. Keep them easy. The team has worked hard. We also want to have everyone come back on camera from all the different sites so that we're all available to answer questions. And with that, we'll move to the question and answer period. And we'll we're open for, we'll then move to any closing remarks by Matt Quinn or other leaders, whether at Tatrick or at the DIAC. So with that, I think we can stop my slides. And we're going to shift cameras so you can see the team and hopefully all the teams. Hey, Matt, we see you. And we see the Tatrick tent. Hi, it's good to see you again. We've spent a heck of a lot of time together.
So, Julian, team, this is Matt here at Fort Detrick, and I just want to thank you and everyone involved in this for all of your preparation and all of the work that went into this. This is a heck of a lot to absorb, and I thought maybe one of the things that you could do is to go through all of the scenarios that we saw right now and maybe describe the technology components of them. You know, one of the things that's challenging when we do a live demonstration of this is to have enough cameras and enough nooks and crannies like a drone evacuation pod to actually see the numbers changing on machines, to see all of the user interfaces that everyone is interfacing with, etc. So maybe just one more time through all of those scenarios to talk about what we saw or to highlight anything that you think was particularly important. And one other thought before I hand it back over is in the very early days of this, back in the very early days of the pandemic, we brought this concept in the 3 lines of effort to General Talley, who at the time was the MRDC commander. And he said something really insightful that stuck with me. And he said, you've succeeded when you change the force structure. And that really is the essence of what we're trying to do. And as we think about the challenges of prolonged care and mass casualties during MDO, we've got a couple of choices. One of those choices is to all of a sudden create, deploy, feed, clothe, manage orders of magnitude more clinicians for these scenarios and to have them in the right places at the right time, or to experiment with the kinds of concepts and technologies that we've demonstrated today and demonstrated actually throughout the NETS and TIDE work in COVID and now in military exercises and experimentation, where, for example, we're using medics to manage very sick people in place of higher level clinicians, but medics with the benefit of telementoring and these sort of partial and complete automation solutions. And so that really, I feel like we've made good on General Talley's charge to us as we did this. Surely tons more work to do, but we really look forward to the opportunity to try to really understand the limits of this and to shape concepts and doctrine of the future with these kinds of capabilities. So with that, I'll hand it back, and maybe we could just remind folks of what we saw and especially why it's important that we chose to demonstrate what we did choose to demonstrate. Over.
All right, Matt, that sounds like an easy request. Let me, if I can, I'd like to lay it out this way. I think everyone saw today that it is possible already to access comprehensive data from critically ill patients in very different environments, even with spotty network coverage, which we saw, even with high bandwidths, which we saw, with many different devices in an interoperable way, not only to obtain enough data to get a complete clinical picture, but possibly through communication with a bedside expert, bedside provider, with a medic or someone else, maybe get additional information if it's needed, and then go ahead and support that person to extend capability as a force multiplier, to tap into expertise that's remotely located. Someone like Colonel Colombo can provide his expertise to many different sites and many different casualties. And we know that that has been a real problem with the pandemic, where we don't have intensivists that are located everywhere. So I think what we've shown today is that the technology is capable, that manufacturers are able, willing to do it, and more than that, to contribute their expertise. We haven't been asking or pushing our collaborating manufacturers to participate. They're providing deep expertise as well. So if you have the right people at the table, manufacturers, research and academic organizations, regulatory experts and safety experts, for example, from the FDA, and others who can drive requests like this, I think we've proven that it's possible. And we can review all the different elements, but I think that's really it in a nutshell. And what I would say is to everyone who's been watching, the casualties were simulated, the injuries were simulated, but nothing else was simulated, right? Everything else was real. The data was real, the control was real, everything was real. And that's really what matters. You don't need to use real casualties to prove the point. But we've also, I think, been conservative and have approached this with humility, that you can't just run out and toss out technology and assume that it's going to change the world by itself, right? That's only a component of the work that it takes to drive real change in healthcare. But we shouldn't be limited by the technology. And I think that's the core message today. The technology is available. It's not limiting us. It really has to do with some of the other facets. With that, I think if I could, I've spoken enough today. There are other experts on the line that I think could add their own richness to the perspective that you're asking for, Matt. One of them is one of the DIAC collaborators, Dr. Loretta Schlachter-Fairchild, who's retired military, and she has I think a unique perspective in having managed portfolios like this and has clinical experience. And also we have FDA collaborators. So if they're available and can comment, I think it would be helpful to hear from them, and then from anyone else that can contribute.
Good afternoon. This is Dr. Schlachter-Fairchild, and I commend the team for all their great work. And in answer to your question, Matt, I think one of the most compelling things that we've seen today, and maybe it wasn't called out explicitly, but I'd like to do so now. One of the hugest challenges is documentation of care. There's many casualties from Iraq and other wars that the documentation of their injuries in the field is done kind of on the fly. They write on their chest, they write on their dressings, they write on a tag, and that gets lost. The documentation of care and all the data that goes along with the care as they move from point of injury to the field hospital to evacuation to a fixed facility is lacking. Today, we saw the data continuity and also passive documentation as the patient goes across all of the echelons of care. Those data from all those devices and the changes that were made are documented in the record in real time and are available at the other end for the treating physicians and nurses to use, and also for later use by the VA and other folks that have to document injury. This is a huge piece that we kind of glossed over, but I did want to take the opportunity to point that out. And that as a retired Army nurse corps officer that worked in burns trauma, It is a huge piece of this. And I greatly appreciate all the work that DocBox has done and the whole team with making this happen. Over.
Thank you very much for adding that. Yeah, we didn't really spend enough time on that critical point, mostly due to the lack of time. But even I think I would add the best job we can do with manual documentation. And as an anesthesiologist, we're used to standing in the OR and documenting as much as we possibly can. It's never all the details. It's never enough information, for example, to see if someone followed a protocol completely, or if there's a problem or a reaction, medication reaction, blood reaction. And certainly, as you said, handing it off between different environments of care is a whole nother level of complexity. So I really appreciate you bringing that in.
And no matter
Dr.
how
Weininger there?
Yes, Dr. Weininger's here.
Oh, good.
Not sure you can hear me because my connection seems to be fading in and out.
We hear you.
I think one of the key demonstration points was what Dave Arney referred to as MDIDs. For years, we've been taking data out of the backs of devices and stuffing them into the electronic health records. And typically you do that through a gateway. The devices don't even natively speak to the electronic health record. So there's all these interfaces that you have to go through. And I think you've demonstrated the concept that if the devices can be a little bit more native in the way they talk to each other, and if we can have a standardized interface, we can accomplish a whole lot more, right? We can accomplish a deployment system so that the entire infrastructure doesn't have to be recreated every time you want to run a different clinical app or update the clinical app. Or if I bring a new sensor or therapy device into the medical field, I don't have to recreate the whole system. So the flexibility this affords for deployment and for development, and I'm assuming cost type things, although that's not my job, you've laid the foundation to show that these work. Over.
And this is Heather from FDA too. I just wanted to piggyback on that, and that we have been focusing on working with the military, different parts of the military, on interoperability and trying to work towards these autonomous systems. And this work is incredibly important. And I agree with everything that Sandy just said. And to be able to see, being able to switch from one ventilator to one brand of ventilator to another, one infusion pump brand to another, was really great to see after we've been talking about it for so many years. And I also just wanted to just sort of applaud the entire group for being able to see that sort of that incremental work and the way it's been developing over the past 2 years. And also wanted to comment on the inclusion of the cybersecurity threat analysis too. Obviously, that's been a big focus for our center for quite a long time. And so it was really great to see, that very broad, large picture view of things. And just wanted to say it's been great being a part of this.
Thank you, Heather. Dave was going to comment on the MDIDs, add to the MDIDs point that Sandy made.
Yeah, so the interfaces that we built with OpenICE, we ended up implementing each infusion pump manufacturer's proprietary interface to build an interface, to build a connection, to have a protocol to communicate with them with our OpenICE platform. And then our application used one single standardized interface to communicate with the remote control application. And what we're hoping to do with the MDIDs work is to show what an interface could look like so that eventually that becomes the standardized interface that gets built into future generation devices. So rather than needing this translation layer, we push that inside of the devices and have a standardized protocol where we can talk to those devices and interchange them without needing to write those individual equipment interfaces or device driver type things. And that enables remote control. It's also, I think, a very necessary stepping stone for autonomous systems. That same interface that we can use to enable remote control can be used by algorithms to directly control the pumps in an automated way.
I'm really glad that Dave brought that point up. We talk about the way we think about remote control and so forth is what we think about is the benefit of adding an external control to a medical device, control it through its port, so to speak, because then whether you use that control capability to control it from near the device outside a patient's room or across the world, you also can use that for a smart system that can integrate data from multiple sources, blood pressure, heart rate, from a vital signs monitor, other information from something else, ventilator information, and then use all of that information to then control the infusion pump. And that really is the basic idea behind the integrated clinical environment. It isn't about one device and one one-to-one control. So that's all part of the research portfolio.
So
Alice,
I was going to say, yes. This is Matt. I would be remiss if we didn't close this with both appreciation for Dr. Alice Eisenberg and her herding cats and making sausage in the Device Interoperability and Autonomy Coordinating Center, and the entire MITRE team who led that effort for us. And I'd like her to provide a few insights from how to the value of the DIAC as an entity in this, and some thoughts on the value of this moving forward. Over.
Thanks, Matt. First, thanks for the appreciation. We always enjoy working with the federal government on tasks like this, where we're trying to innovate, we're trying to solve problems that others haven't solved before. So it's been a real pleasure for us to work with you on this. The DIAC was a unique structure, as you mentioned in your slides to start our discussion today, in that we were not iterating, we were working collaboratively as a team. And I think it was a really valuable exercise to provide a safe space for all of those people to come together and exchange intellectual ideas, be able to build upon each other's ideas, and come up with that system that is greater than the sum of its parts, so to speak. So I definitely think that going forward, this concept of having these partnerships across vendors, across manufacturers, across academia, and the federal government, of course, involving our federal partners to help guide us into the future of what their vision is for their work, was extremely helpful and is a very valuable tool to take into the future. So again, we really think this is a great idea, and look forward to seeing what may come from something similar in the future.
If I could, first of all, thank you, Alice. I want to express the gratitude on behalf of our team, not only to you and the MITRE team, but there are a lot of other people that aren't on camera now, right? There are the people at Tatrick in the tent, Ethan and Nicole and the medics, and Tracy and Roush and Stephen Daner there. And I was hoping everyone would be on camera, right? Oh, I do see them. It's just the view. I missed you. I couldn't see you. There you are, guys. Everyone has been super responsive to the demands of pulling together this multi-site demonstration in all over. The Nihon Koden team, led by Dr. Du, who's both an intensivist, anesthesiologist, and president of the company. So, we're dealing with a lot of strength across the board at each one of the companies. And it's really been a pleasure for us to engage in that way. This is a coalition of the willing who are trying to change the healthcare ecosystem so that we could deploy better, safer, smarter technology for patient care. And it's really gratifying to see how large that coalition is and how far we've been able to come, although the work isn't done yet.
Well, that sounds like a great way to finish this off. A reminder to everyone that we will have a recording of this available soon. We're still open to questions and inquiries about this. Just email the folks on the invitation from MITRE or us directly. And again, I want to thank everyone for participating in this. This was a live demonstration with real people in many different places. Orchestrating something like this is not easy. It's entirely risky, and it's subject to the vagaries of the real world. And we wouldn't think about doing it any other way because of the professionalism and the expertise and the dedication of the people here. So thank you from us, Colonel Pamplin, and the Tatrick team, and on to the next projects. and think about how this technology could be applied within the military health system and more broadly. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
Take care.